friends, and welcome to Storytime. I am Flyleaf the Book Fairy, your friendly neighborhood storybook fairy, and many of our books deal with fairies. Magical fairies. Lady fairies, little girl fairies, queen fairies, princess fairies. Well, today we are going to be reading a book about Mr. Fairy. It is written by Morgane de Cadier and illustrated by Florian Pige. It was originally written in French and has been translated into English. Are you ready to get started? There he is! Mr. Fairy. Everyone knows the forest is full of all kinds of fairies. There are morning fairies and brave fairies, sleepy time fairies, and even fairies that clean. I'm not one of those. And then there's Mr. Fairy. Mr. Fairy is not a morning fairy. He cannot get up in time to wake the forest animals. He barely makes it to breakfast. Mr. Fairy is not a kissing fairy. He cannot make the couples kiss. He tries. He waves his magic wand, but all he gets are giggles. Mr. Fairy is not a boo-boo fairy who fixes and heals and makes it all better. Mr. Fairy tries. He waves his wand, but the trees turn to pink fluff. Mr. Fairy sighs. I cannot get it right. I'm the most useless fairy in the forest. I'm the fairy of nothing at all. Sad and unhappy, Mr. Fairy leaves his forest home. He flies away to another, very different forest. Mr. Fairy had never seen a forest like it. Have you? Have you seen a forest that looks like this? I bet some of you even live in a forest that looks like this. Here, everything is dark and gray and colorless. People walk around with their faces down, lost in the gloom of the streets. Just like Mr. Fairy, everyone here seems sad and unhappy too. Mr. Fairy wants to help. Cautiously, he waves his wand. Suddenly, light bursts over the drab city walls in beautiful shades of color. One by one, smiles appear on the faces of the people. No longer feeling sad and unhappy, Mr. Fairy flies on. He sees people heading underground and decides to follow. What are they doing down there? Mr. Fairy flies between the people, under arms and over bellies, waving his magic wand and flapping his tiny wings. He tickles everyone in his path. Soon the whole train is rocking left to right with laughter. That tickles, they say, as they chuckle and smile. Excited by the changes in the people below, Mr. Fairy flies back up to the street. He sees more gloomy faces. What can I do now? He asks himself. Mr. Fairy tries. He waves his wand, and the umbrellas change into huge pink balls. Balls of cotton candy. The delight and happiness on the faces of the people reminds him of his friends back home. Immediately, he turns back toward the forest, his forest. Flying as fast as he can, he travels home. Something is worrying him. I wonder what it is. Oh, Mr. Fairy arrives and cannot believe his eyes. What happened to the colors of the forest? Where are all his happy forest friends? Hello? Hello? Is anyone there? His friends call out, Mr. Fairy, we are so glad you're back. We lost the gift of laughter. We've tried everything, but we are unable to find our smiles. Without a word, Mr. Fairy confidently waves his wand. and color and laughter returned to the forest. What Mr. Fairy had not known was he was not the most useless fairy. He was not the fairy of nothing at all. Mr. Fairy finally realized that although he could not wake the forest or magic a kiss, he could make it all better in his own special way. Everyone knows the forest is full of all kinds of fairies. There are morning fairies, brave fairies, sleepy time fairies, and even fairies that clean. I'm still not one of those. But there is only one who can make you smile, who spreads happiness and joy wherever he goes, and his name is Mr. Fairy. The end. I hope you liked today's book, and I'm so glad that you could join me. I'll see you another day for another story. Goodbye, friends.